All right, let's dive into this productivity thing. We're tackling Eat That Frog, right? This Brian Tracy book, it's like legendary for a reason, don't you think?
Definitely a classic. It's all about getting things done no matter how crazy things get.
Exactly. And it's amazing how many different types of people use these techniques. Like he's got stories about surgeons, chefs, business owners all over the US.
It's really incredible to see how widely applicable these principles are.
Yeah, and today we're going to extract those gold nuggets, those strategies that you can use right away to crush your to-do list and make real progress on what matters.
You hit the nail on the head with making real progress,
Yeah.
because I think that's at the heart of what Tracy's getting at. It's not about working harder, it's about being intentional, making sure your efforts actually line up with your goals.
Makes sense. So where do we even start with all this? The book covers so much.
Well, he starts with the foundation, which is setting clear goals.
Right, because it's easy to say, I want to be successful, but what does that even mean?
Exactly. He uses this example of a young professional in New York City who's aiming for a promotion. And just by writing down that specific goal, like become a senior analyst by December 2025, they transform this vague desire into an actionable plan.
This is kind of like making a roadmap instead of just wandering around aimlessly.
Exactly. And once you have that roadmap, then daily planning becomes super crucial.
Oh, for sure. I think we've all been there, feeling overwhelmed by that never-ending to-do list.
Right. Tracy uses this example of a working mom in Chicago who's juggling, a corporate job and family life. And just by taking some time each evening to plan out her next day, she's able to stay organized and focused, even with a jam-packed schedule.
So it's like a little planning up front can save you a ton of stress later on.
You got it.
So we've got clear goals, we've got a plan, but then there's this big question. How do we decide what to tackle first? With limited time, we can't do everything right.
Right. And that's where one of the most powerful ideas from the book comes in, which is the 80-20 rule.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that.
It basically highlights this truth about productivity. We often spread ourselves way too thin, working on all these tasks that don't really move the needle.
It's so true. Busy work, it can be such a trap.
Right. And the key is to figure out what those crucial 20% activities are, the ones that actually drive the majority of the results, and then focus on those.
I love that. Work smarter, not harder, right?
Exactly. And Tracy gives this great example of a small business owner in Texas who realized that 80% of their revenue was coming from just 20% of their clients.
Wow, that's incredible.
So by shifting their focus to attract more of those high-value clients, they were able to really boost their profits.
That's amazing. Okay, but how do we actually figure out what that crucial 20% is for us?
Well, that leads us to another important principle, thinking about the consequences of our actions.
Okay, interesting. So it's not just about doing a task, it's about understanding the impact it has, right?
Right. It's about making thoughtful choices, understanding the potential long-term effects of what we do today.
Makes sense.
He uses this example of a college student in California, facing that classic summer dilemma party all summer, or take an unpaid internship at a top tech firm.
Oh, yeah. That's a tough one.
And by choosing the internship, even though it's unpaid, they're setting themselves up for greater success down the line.
So it's like sometimes the choices that feel good in the short term aren't always the best for our future.
Exactly. It's about that delayed gratification.
So we're thinking long term. But how do we apply this to our daily to-do lists?
Well, Tracy offers a bunch of practical techniques for prioritization, and one that's super popular is the ABCDE method.
The ABCDE method. Tell me more about that.
So you basically rank your tasks based on their importance. A tasks are the most crucial, your must-dos. E tasks are things you can eliminate or delegate.
Oh, I like that. So it's like ruthlessly categorizing tasks based on how much impact they actually have.
Exactly. And it helps you stay focused on those A tasks, the things that really matter.
So if we think about our busy surgeon in Florida, what would be an example of an A task for them?
Oh, definitely performing surgeries, right. Life-saving, time-sensitive. Can't delegate those.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's their A task. What about a B task?
A B task might be something like attending staff meetings. Important, but not as urgent as a surgery.
Got it. And then we work our way down, right?
Exactly. C tasks could be things like reading medical journals, keeping up to date but not as pressing, and so on, all the way down to those E tasks, the things that honestly can probably just be ignored or handed off to someone else.
Oh, I'm starting to see how this works. So it's like a system for sorting through all that chaos.
Exactly. Now, there's another important concept Tracy talks about, which is identifying your key result areas, your KRAs.
Okay, key result areas. What are those?
These are the activities that truly determine your success in a specific role. He uses the example of a sales executive in Seattle. So for them, their key result areas might be client meetings, closing deals, lead generation.
So it's like figuring out the 20% that drives 80% of your success.
You got it. It's all about focusing your energy on what moves the needle.
This is making so much sense. But okay, what about those of us who feel like we're constantly running out of time? Like there are just not enough hours in the day.
Well, Tracy addresses that head on with what he calls the law of forced efficiency.
Oh, okay. The law of forced efficiency. What's that all about?
It's the idea that there will never be enough time for everything, so we have to work within the constraints of our 24-hour day.
Yeah, tell me about it. I feel that every day.
So it's about making smart choices, right? He tells this story of a startup founder in Silicon Valley who limits non-essential meetings to, like, just 15 minutes.
Wow. 15 minutes. That's like a game changer.
Right? And they also use automation tools for all those repetitive tasks. This frees up their time for the really important things.
Like product development or strategy, right?
Exactly.
Okay, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
I kind of want to dive deeper into that 15-minute meeting thing later.
We'll definitely come back to that. But for now, let's move on to some of the more specific strategies that Tracy outlines for, like actually getting stuff done. More actionable stuff.
Okay, sounds good. I'm ready to get tactical.
All right. Well, one of the most fundamental but often overlooked strategies is thorough preparation.
Preparation, okay.
He talks about this lawyer in Washington, D.C. who, like, meticulously prepares for their court cases the night before.
So, no last-minute scrambling for them. But why is that so important?
Well, by being totally prepared, the lawyer can present their case super confidently without wasting time or energy on, like, unnecessary stress.
It's like the more prepared you are, the smoother everything goes.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder how much time we all waste by not being prepared.
Yeah,
right?
totally. It's like we're creating those problems for ourselves.
Right. Okay, now, are you ready for another key principle?
Hit me with it.
Continuous learning. Tracy's a huge advocate for this.
Oh, absolutely. It's so easy to get comfortable and be like, okay, I know enough.
Yeah.
But there's always more to learn, right?
Always. And he shares the story of a real estate agent in Atlanta who took an online course on digital marketing.
Oh, smart.
And just by investing in her knowledge, she was able to generate way more leads, really boost her business.
That's so cool. So learning can directly translate into results, huh?
For sure. And finally, for this part of our deep dive, let's talk about leveraging your strengths. He's got this great example of a chef in New Orleans.
Oh, New Orleans, what kind of food?
So this chef found that their real passion, their real expertise was Cajun cuisine. And instead of trying to be everything to everyone, they opened a high-end Cajun restaurant.
And it was a hit, right?
Huge success.
That's amazing.
It's all about focusing on what you do best.
Playing to your strengths instead of trying to be a jack of all trades. I love that. This has been fantastic. We've covered so much ground, setting goals, planning, the 80-20 rule, and even some practical techniques for getting things done.
And we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore.
I know. Like, what happens when we hit those roadblocks? How do we deal with those obstacles that, inevitably pop up?
You're right. That's the next big thing we need to tackle. And that's exactly where we're headed next. Get ready to get even more tactical.
I'm excited.
All right, welcome back to our deep dive into Brian Tracy's Eat That Frog, ready to get even more tactical.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So we've talked about setting goals, prioritizing, but life happens for you.
It sure does.
What happens when those obstacles pop up?
Exactly, those roadblocks. But Tracy doesn't just leave us hanging. He gives us a framework for overcoming them, which is really cool.
I love that, a framework. Okay, so what's step one?
One of the key things he talks about is identifying your key constraints, those bottlenecks that are holding you back.
Oh, yeah, bottlenecks. I've heard of that, but how do we actually find them?
He uses a great example of a truck company owner, actually. In Ohio, this guy's struggling with, delivery delays.
Oh, no.
Instead of just throwing more resources at the problem, he kind of steps back, analyzes his operations, and he realizes the main bottleneck, the real culprit, his aging fleet of trucks.
Really? The trucks?
Yep. So he invests in new trucks, gets rid of the old ones, and boom, eliminates the root cause of the delays.
Wow. So it's like finding that leverage point where a small change can make a huge difference.
Exactly. It's about being a problem solver, not just a task doer.
I love that. Problem solver, not task doer. Okay, so we've identified the bottleneck. Now what?
Well, another thing people struggle with, right, is feeling overwhelmed by big goals.
Oh, for sure. Big goals can be intimidating.
Yeah. He tells us to take it, and I'm quoting here, one oil barrel at a time.
One oil barrel at a time? What does that even mean?
It's about breaking down those massive tasks into smaller, manageable pieces. He tells this story of a first-generation college student who's just feeling totally overwhelmed by the thought of graduating.
Yeah, I can see how that would be daunting.
Right. So she breaks it down step by step. Complete one semester at a time, join a study group, apply for scholarships. Suddenly, it feels way less overwhelming.
So it's about those small wins, right? Building momentum.
Exactly. And that leads us to another super important aspect. Self-accountability.
Self-accountability. Okay, I need to hear more about this.
So even if you don't have like an external deadline from a boss or a client, you got to create that internal pressure to keep moving forward.
Makes sense.
Tracy has this example of a freelancer who's, prone to procrastination. Classic, right?
Oh, I know that feeling.
So what she does is she sets self-imposed deadlines for projects, but a whole week ahead of the actual client deadline.
Oh, that's clever. It's like tricking your brain into taking action sooner.
Exactly. It's all about finding those strategies that work for you. Now, up until now, we've been focusing a lot on the external, right? Systems, techniques.
Yeah, like how to organize our to-do lists and all that.
Right. But Tracy doesn't forget about the internal game. He's got a whole section on maximizing your personal power.
Personal power. I like that. What does that even mean?
It's about taking care of yourself, your physical and mental well-being, so you can, show up as your best self.
Oh, yeah, like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly. And he gives this example of, I think it's a corporate executive in Boston, who really prioritizes a morning routine to boost their energy levels. Working out, healthy breakfast, avoiding too much caffeine.
Oh, the morning routine's so important.
Like
I'm
that?
trying to get better at that myself. But, okay, so it's not just about physical energy, right?
Right. Mental and emotional energy, too. And that means staying motivated, especially when things get tough, which they inevitably do.
Oh, yeah. Those tough times can be so draining.
He talks about this entrepreneur in Houston who uses, get this, motivational quotes and podcasts to stay inspired.
Oh, I do that too. I love listening to podcasts on my commute. It's like a little pep talk for my brain.
That's awesome. It's about surrounding yourself with positivity, reminding yourself why you're doing what you're doing.
Makes sense. Okay, now here's a concept that kind of threw me for a loop when I first read it. Creative procrastination.
Creative procrastination. I know, right? It sounds kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah. Isn't procrastination, like, always bad?
Well, Tracy makes a distinction. He says there's a difference between procrastinating on those really important tasks and strategically delaying or even eliminating the unimportant ones.
So it's like picking your battles. Okay, but how does that actually make you more productive?
He uses the example of a software engineer in San Francisco. This guy, he knows that if he checks his email first thing in the morning, he's going to get sucked into that rabbit hole of distractions.
Oh, yeah, I've been there. Email can be such a time suck.
Right. So he focuses on his high-value coding work first. He doesn't even look at email until later in the day when his energy levels are lower.
So it's about being intentional with your time and energy and recognizing that, like, some tasks are more important than others.
Exactly. And this brings us to, the heart of the book, really, eating that frog.
Okay, finally. I'm waiting for this. So how do we tackle those big, scary tasks that we tend to avoid? Those frogs, as he calls them.
It's all about tackling them first thing in the morning. Get it out of the way, and you'll feel amazing the rest of the day. Trust me.
That sounds great in theory, but what if the frog is so big, so overwhelming, that it feels impossible to even start?
He has a strategy for that, too. He calls it, I love this, slicing and dicing.
Slicing and dicing. Okay, tell me more.
He shares this story of a writer who's, really struggling to finish her book. It's just this huge, daunting task, right?
Oh, yeah, writing a whole book. That's a big frog.
Right. So instead of focusing on the whole book, she breaks it down into a daily goal, 500 words a day. That's it.
That's manageable, right? 500 words a day. And over time, it adds up.
Exactly. It's like that saying, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
I love that. Okay, so we've sliced and diced our frog into smaller pieces, but then we need the time to actually do the work.
Right. Yes. And Tracy talks about creating these large chunks of time for focused work. He uses this example of a software developer in Austin who blocks off 3 hours every morning for what he calls deep work.
Deep work. So no distractions, just pure focus.
Exactly. No email, no phone, just coding. And he gets so much more done that way. It's amazing.
I can only imagine. Okay, so deep work. Check. What else?
This ties into another one of his principles, developing a sense of urgency.
So it's not just about working hard, it's about working fast.
Well, it's about being decisive and action-oriented. He tells this story of a stock trader in Chicago.
Okay, a stock trader. High pressure environment.
Right. And they treat every market open as this critical window of opportunity. They make decisions quickly, execute trades fast, to get the best results.
So it's about seizing the moment, not overthinking things.
Exactly. And finally, we come to one of his most, I think, counterintuitive principles, single tasking.
Wait, single tasking?
Yeah.
But isn't multitasking like the key to getting more done?
It's funny, right? That's what we've been told for so long. But the research actually shows that multitasking makes us less efficient.
Really? I would have thought the opposite.
It's true. When our attention is divided, we make more mistakes. We take longer to complete tasks. Tracy says we should focus on one thing at a time, finish it, then move on.
So it's about quality over quantity.
Yes. He has this example of a customer service rep in Miami. She used to juggle multiple calls at once, classic multitasking, but she switched to a single tasking approach, and her accuracy and efficiency just shot up.
That's incredible.
And she felt less stressed, too.
I can imagine. Less juggling, less stress. So I guess it's like literally trying to juggle too many balls at once.
Right.
Eventually you're going to drop something.
That's a perfect analogy. And you know what? That brings us to the end of this part of our deep dive. We've talked about overcoming obstacles, maximizing your energy, and tackling those frogs head on.
This has been so helpful. I feel like I'm starting to get it. But okay, big question. How do we apply all this to our own lives? Where do we even begin?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, to be honest. It's like we've been given this amazing toolkit, but now I'm not sure which tool to pick up first.
I get it. It can definitely feel like a lot. But I think if we go back to the core message of eat that frog, it really boils down to this. Productivity isn't about being busy. It's about being effective.
Yeah, it's about being intentional, right? Choosing where to focus our energy.
That's exactly it. Making conscious choices about how we spend our time and focusing on those tasks that actually matter, the ones that move us closer to our goals.
So it's about figuring out, what's our frog, and then just eating it.
That's the challenge, isn't it, for all of us? What is that one task, that one thing that we've been putting off, the one that feels really daunting or maybe even a little bit scary?
It's like, that feeling you get when you think about it, that pit in your stomach? It's like, ugh, I don't want to do that.
That's the one. And Tracy says that by tackling that frog head on, first thing in the morning, you actually free yourself up mentally and emotionally for the rest of the day.
Oh, that makes sense. So once you've eaten the frog, everything else feels easier.
Exactly. You've already conquered the biggest hurdle, so you can face everything else with more confidence,
Okay, I like that. So what is your frog? Right now, is there something you've been avoiding?
That's a good question. I think for me, I've been meaning to redesign my website, but it just feels like such a big project,
Oh, I totally get that. Website redesigns can be a beast. But maybe you could just start with one small piece, like choosing a new template or updating your portfolio.
You're right. It's about breaking it down into smaller steps, just like we talked about earlier.
Exactly. So what about our listeners? What do you think their frogs might be?
Ooh, that's a good one. I bet some of them are thinking about finally launching that side hustle they've been dreaming of. Or maybe it's having that difficult conversation they've been putting off. Or even something smaller, but still important, like decluttering their workspace.
Or finally getting their finances organized. I know that's a big one for a lot of people.
Totally. And whatever it is, the key is to just take action, right?
Don't let it hang over you any longer. Just start taking those small steps towards getting it done.
It's amazing how much lighter you feel once you start making progress,
It's like that feeling of accomplishment, yes, I did it.
Exactly. And if you're feeling stuck, remember all the tools we've talked about today. The 80-20 rule, the ABCDE method, the power of planning and preparation. These are all things you can start using right now to make a real difference.
And remember, it's a journey, not a destination. We're all going to have days where we feel more productive than others.
That's so true. It's all about finding what works for you and being kind to yourself along the way.
Absolutely. So everyone listening, keep exploring, keep growing, and keep eating those frogs. You got this.